Let's deal with the vexed matters that we have tabled today for discussion, and my guest are seated. Abdul Malik Kweku Bako, he is editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Ni Ama Akomfra is the general secretary of the Convention People's Party, the CPP. Dr. Owusu Friya Koto is MP for Kwadaso and is ranking member, Committee on Food, Agriculture and Cocoa Affairs of Parliament. Also, Dr. Ahmed Yakubu Al-Hassan is Deputy Minister of Food and Agriculture in charge of crops. We will be joined on the phone by Kofi Bentel, who is Vice President of Imani, Ghana. They have some very interesting views about the Commander Sugar Factory. Now, gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning. Good morning to you.
I am excited to have you, and first of all, like I mentioned, of course, we cannot begin the discussion without briefly sharing our views in commemoration of the June 3 disasters, what has happened within the period and how the commemoration went yesterday. I'll start with Doc. You also come from a constituency where we are told that there are areas that are prone to, flooding and so on. What do you say about the June 3rd disaster, June 3 disaster, and what you think we have done correctly after that?
Well, I think that it is a disaster which could have been avoided, in the sense that it wasn't the first time Accra had been flooded. I remember very well in 1995, the flooding which came all over. At that time, I had an office in Osu, and I just bought a new Mercedes-Benz.
I think
1995.
95.
And I had a new Mercedes-Benz, and my office was completely covered in water.
Where in Accra?
Osu in Accra.
Okay.
And I'll never forget that day. The water was about 8 feet high. The whole house, everything was underwater. And after that experience, a lot of noise were made by the authorities of trying to control the diagnostics and all those things. And since then, we've had a series of the same things and the same rhetoric being delivered by the authorities who will have to see to it. And I think that last year's was really the accumulation of inactions over the period. And I don't think, given the size of the problem, that enough has been done within the 1 year to avoid a similar disaster. That is the unfortunate thing about it. Now, if you look at the resources which have been allocated to dredging the Odo and all those things,
We're told 40% of the work has been done.
Well, 40% of the work.
It took that disaster to wake us up.
Yes, and not only that. I'm not even sure about the 40%. Who is verifying the 40%? His figures are coming. Well, okay, fair enough, but 40% is still very, very low, given that we have had all these 12 months to correct it. And we know what happened recently. The last time there was a downpour about 2 weeks ago, what happened? The damage that was done. So I think that we need to redouble our efforts in trying to avoid this kind of situation in the future.
Okay. We need to double our efforts. Do you think we are actually doing anything in that regard?
Well, firstly, Samson, let me say good morning to you, our panelists here, your team here, and our viewers. I think we also need to pass on and continue to pass on our condolences to affected families, bereaved families on this issue, because it's only a year ago and many people are still feeling very, very, very sad. But I think for me, the abiding images from a year ago is the way that we treated those who perished. The way that many people were simply picked up and thrown into trucks. It demonstrated a lack of humanity. It demonstrated a total dehumanization of those who deserve to be treated with respect. And it also showed on the government and the authorities simply disrespected those who have died, and symptomatic of their disrespect for the citizens of this country. Those images stay with many people. People's loved ones were simply, and if our nation is going to mature, we simply need to learn from others. In other countries, in any other country, the deceased would have been picked up in a fleet of ambulances and they would have been treated with respect. That didn't happen in this instance. Have we learned any lessons? Well, civil society groups say no. The head of NADMO says no, because the conditions remain the same. The fire service says no, because there's a lack of equipment, means they are handicapped. So all the things, all the institutions which need to be equipped to deal with such things say that nothing has happened. And on the human side, those whose names were written, those who, the authorities moved to try and show sympathy, okay, we'll deal with it, give us your names. None of them, no follow-up has happened in that year. Nothing has happened. They have not been contacted, no compensation, nothing has happened. So what has changed? And it's just a question of lip service on these issues. And certainly flooding has become an annual disaster in this country. And the speeches that you hear just seem to be pre-prepared speeches with the dates are simply changed. Yes, we're sorry, we'll do something about it. How many years? And Doc mentioned 1995. 1995. So whether it's 40% complete since last year, to me, is neither here nor there. Is 40% too late? Is 40% which is too slow? Is 40% which should have happened 20 years ago? And a year on from the most shocking disaster in the history of this country, we are hearing from all the institutions the same old thing. Many believe that the government just continues to pay lip service. How long have we been doing this? So nothing has happened. I don't think we've learned any lessons. And I don't think that we can continue to even blame, as the minister said recently, blame individuals throwing rubbish into the gutter, etc. We need fundamental check-up in how we approach things.
That's a really very sad commentary, because we should have some very positive things to say after the disaster. Let's quickly speak to Engineer Wise Ametepe, who is a member of the June 3 Disaster Committee. Thank you very much for joining us, Engineer Ametepe. Okay, we seem to have lost him on the line. We'll try and get him to give just some brief details about the report that they had. Now, Doc, what do you also say? It does appear that we are just, it's just business as usual. Is that how you see it?
No, I don't think that that's how I see it. I think that we need to look at these issues from very objective and balanced positions. Because we are discussing our country. We're not discussing a government. We're discussing something that impacted on all of us as citizens. So our discussion must be along those lines. Indeed, it's not only floods that affect us. There are also storms. There are also fires that run across the entire country. And so the fundamental question is,
but it of course has to be also about the government, because you had over 150 lives lost, and the president went there and made such a bold promise, a promise that the people relied on.
I thought that that's exactly what I don't want to do. I don't want to be personalizing the discussion. No, just a minute. When necessary, I would. But I want us to look at it more as citizens of a country. And I'm saying that it's not only floods that are more conspicuous only when it is happening in Accra. It is sad that all these viable and good lives have to be lost. Then also we have storms that affect places in our country.
there are also fire outbreaks and so on. The fundamental question is, as public institutions that are supposed to be sufficiently resourced and prepared to run into these emergencies, do we as a country, through government, resource them enough to be ready to deal with these issues? That is a very important question. I think that some of the emergency agencies do their best within the limited resources that they have, but we need to build them further, particularly if we are observing that the more we don't act and the more we don't resource them, the bigger the disasters are getting and impacting on us. Regulatory bodies, it's only when these such disasters happen that we advocate and condemn governments for it. But when it is peacetime, how many of us take time to find out whether NADMO has been prepared enough?
Okay, just
So
hold
the
on
fire
briefly.
service
Just hold on
has
briefly.
enough
Let me go to Engineer Ametepe. Thank you very much for joining us once again, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Great. Now, tell us, from your report, what did you narrow down to be the results? I mean, briefly, because we certainly are aware of some of the bits and pieces, but just remind us, what did you narrow down to be the cause of the June 3 flood and fire?
Yeah, good morning to you and listeners. Yeah. The cause of the June 3rd flood came as a result of flooding and the fire. These are the two main causes of that particular June 3rd event. But then you may ask, what are or were the causes of the flooding? That day we had a rainfall, and our channels were not in readiness to convey that amount of flow. And coupled with that, we had a lot of materials on the water surface, which also served as a blockage to the little capacities that the channels had, and so they were completely incapacitated.
We are talking about choked gutters or choked
Then,
drains.
to crown it all, we had the leakage of the fuel from the filling station, which was displaced by the flood, which entered the underground fuel storage tanks. And so the fuel was floating on the surface. And then somebody's careless action, the fire was set up. So in brief, this is how it is.
Okay. Are they particular persons or institutions or groups that have been identified and fixed with any liability in this regard?
Well, we investigated the filling station and found out that the filling station was careless in covering their petrol tanks. And then we also identified the gentleman who set the fire, and we, after the interrogation, we found out that either he did it out of ignorance or intentional, but we couldn't establish that intentional act. So we referred the action back to the authorities to find out if it was done out of intention. Then the appropriate actions will be taken. Now, also back to the institutions like the assemblies and so on, which were to see to the cleaning of the channels. We found out that the channels were to have been cleaned, but unfortunately, the channels were not clean, and so the institutions were to be at least accountable to that. And so the finding was that they should be made to clean the channels and get them ready for any future flooding.
Right. So that's one of your recommendations. And you say in respect of the man who was identified to have been the cause of the fire, you are expecting authority. Which specific authority is it that you are expecting to determine whether or not there was intentionality?
Intention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which authority are you looking at? Is it Attorney General?
No. The investigative authorities. Yeah.
So you're talking about the police?
Police. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we can say there's a report to a particular police station and they are supposed to act on it. Is that the case?
Of course, the culprit was brought to us by the what do you call it, the police or the BNI.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. And so, I mean, before you take leave of us, just tell us what recommendations you made have you discovered are being implemented?
Yeah, the recommendations we made were in three categories: the immediate action, the medium, and the long term. The immediate is the cleaning up of the Odo Channel, cleaning up the Koli Lagoon, and cleaning up the interceptor, as they call it the CLEP interceptor. And these ones, we've seen that they are ongoing. If you look at the Odo has been cleaned to a large extent. The Koli Lagoon is in the process. They are cleaning the Koli Lagoon. Of course, the lagoon cleaning will be because it will take a long time because the requisite equipment for the cleaning of the lagoon, for the dredging of the lagoon, will have to be procured. And now, by the kind gesture of a contractor, they have got the equipment and they have started the dredging. Of course, the dredging will take a long time, as I said. It may take about a year to complete the dredging of the Koli Lagoon because the volume of material that has been deposited over the years is quite huge. So you don't expect that the cleaning should just take 3 months, 4 months, to complete. No, that will take a longer time have it complete.
All right. Were you also responsible for determining who should get some compensation and how much?
No, we're not. Yeah.
Your committee didn't do that at all? Thank you.
The committee recommended that government should look at people who lost their properties and also see to at least assist families that lost their bereaved ones and people who have got injured. Yeah, but we did not specify any amount that government should give this and give that. No.
Okay. Thank you very much, Engineer Wise Amitepe, a member of the June 3 Disaster Committee. Thank you very much. So, from Engineer, it's obvious that something has been done and something is ongoing as well.
Yeah, so I'll just make the point that we have our various agencies and institutions that are supposed to be sufficiently resourced and equipped to deal with disasters which will always come. The other issue is that, and for me, this is my personal view, interagency communication is also important. You can have all the resources as individual agencies, but if you don't communicate to prepare the citizens sufficiently for such disasters, you always end up with such calamities. For instance, Ghana Meteo Agency, they are supposed to forecast the weather and so on. And we have always known that even though Accra receives just around 800 millimeters of rain annually, sometimes you can have a third of that coming in 2 days, in 2 to 3 days. Okay. There should be enough communication to prepare us to look forward to it. Right. Then also, there are some other things that are being done to assist people restore their livelihoods that may not be making the headlines. I, for instance, know that the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, in collaboration with the FAO, have a grant facility to support farmers who lost their farms to the floods so that they can have their livelihoods restored. And this culminated from, at the time that the June 3rd disaster occurred, I was not in the country. I was leading a delegation to the FAO Global Delegates meeting. And then the Director General called me to express his sympathy to the government and President of Ghana, and then also the people of Ghana. And in the process, wrote a letter to the President and expressed in the letter that the FAO is still ready to assist in any way possible to restore lives. And then we put a small project together and approach them because we got reports.
So you're handing farmers cash?
We're not handing farmers cash. We are restoring system that will allow them to have their life. I think they were
Example.
No, I cannot recall the specific community just around here. I'm leading the project, but the committee has just left me.
Okay, but just say what exactly you are doing.
It's
there.
a $500,000 project meant to redo the canals and other engineering of the lands there, so that they can go back and do their production for their lives.
So that when next the rains come, they will not be affected. They will not be floods. That's what you are saying.
Something. A disaster is a disaster. If I tell you that if they engineer a plot to contain 200 millimeters
No, you
of
see,
rain,
what
just
you're
a minute.
saying,
No,
what you're
please,
saying, the
please.
fund has a purpose.
You have asked me a question, and I'm answering.
No, I think that we need to
Yep.
we need to be quick
Yeah.
about this. And
Yes,
you see,
and I'm being.
no,
you are the
if
one
you
wasting the
don't-
time.
If you don't see it as seeking to interrogate you unnecessarily, I think you may get it. I'm saying that you said you have gone to them to support them in a way. And I wanted to know the exact support. And you're saying that you're trying to clear up some canals that were not properly done. And that is the support. That's what you mean you are
No,
doing for
I'm
them.
saying that we are rebuilding the canals, engineering the lands on which the production is done, so that they can go back and continue to do their production.
So
That's what I
individual
said.
farmers, their farmlands, you are
Yeah.
re-engineering
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And by that
the
you
area
mean
that was affected.
by that you mean what exactly?
Oh.
Engineering the lands.
Just preparing the land site that they can use it for irrigation production.
Okay,
Yeah, you might not be able to appreciate it, but I'm sure.
no,
Dr.
it is
Akuta
not for
feel
my.
that
It is
that's-
not for my purpose. It's for the purposes of
The audience.
those who are
Absolutely.
watching and
I agree.
listening to us, so
But
that they can appreciate.
I'm sure many people who are agriculture oriented understand exactly what I'm saying.
No, I have
Other than-
millions of people who are listening who are not agriculture oriented. So when you say you are re-engineering the lands for them, like you're weeding the lands for them so they can plant.
Demarcating it. What is it?
You see, I don't know how else to put it, but the issue is the lands were in a certain state,
Okay.
and the floods affected those lands. Either it knocked down all the bonds and flooded the fields
Okay.
and lost the entire crop, and perhaps took off the bonds that were built.
All right.
Now, and maybe choked the canals that carried water to the fields.
Okay.
The project is meant to rebuild these canals, prepare those bonds so that it can hold water, and then it will now be sufficiently prepared for farmers to go and do their
And possibly to
farming.
prevent the flooding, if there is any.
And that's exactly the question I was answering, and you won't allow me. And I said, you engineer fields to contain to carry a certain volume of weight of water.
Okay.
Okay? If it exceeds that limit, obviously you have challenges. There will be floods. That's exactly the point I'm making.
Okay. I just wanted to know the focus, the purpose, whether it was because we are talking about floods, it was aimed at preventing the floods. But you are trying to say, well, you cannot. Floods are not man-made situations, so you can't determine whatever it is. Now, Kweku, it does appear that victims and families of victims are still not seeing much that is being done, apart from the, 10,000 or so Ghana cedis that was handed them for purposes of the burial processes and the funerals that they had to organize. And I'm talking about the 153 families. It does appear most of them cannot see much being done. Just yesterday, we have had a number of them appearing on various platforms and expressing very, situations that are quite disturbing. There's this woman who spoke about a daughter of a victim who has been left, and that girl is supposed to be in JHS. She's unable to continue to keep the girl in JHS, and so she's withdrawn her. There is this man by name Nana Osafo Ampao, who is a herbalist and who suffered some burns. The graphic online shows his pictures and reports how much he suffered. And he says he's got 3 children. Now all the kids, they see him and they call him Kakai. They can't approach him. Very disturbing situation. But the bad part of it is that he was a breadwinner. Now he's gone to live with his 67-year-old mom, who has to reversal of roles, so to speak, who has to take care of him and his wife, who also lost her job in the process. Those give me indications that we are not reaching out to the victims or families of the victims.
Well, I don't know. If I'm wrong, you can quickly correct me. Was the report ever published? The report of the committee?
I'm unaware.
Okay, that's part of the subculture we have here, because then there isn't much transparency. We don't know what the report says.
Right.
We don't know what the recommendations are, except the little bits that we are told during such programs. So we are unable to monitor and evaluate or track the implementation of the committee's report. And that puts all of us in a very tricky situation. So then there's much more room for speculation and, you know, even lamentation. It's just not justice for us in terms of how we are handling such projects. So here we are. I haven't cited a report. I don't know what the recommendations were. I don't know what other things they identified. This quick one, I'll come to the question you asked because it's a very important one. The thing about the fuel station, the GOIL, was it GOIL?
Yes.
GOIL. If I recall, GOIL too had some different versions.
They did.
So I don't know, in the report, how do they conclude that side? It's a disputed area, you know. So here we are with all these things, and we are not sure what we are talking about.
He says that in the report they identified that they didn't seem to have covered, you know.
They disputed that, if you recall,
properly.
on this very show, there was a dispute, you know, so we don't know what was the conclusion exactly. I don't know. I am not an expert.
But you see, he concludes by saying, even though that is where the oil came out of, they don't seem to want to put a blame on them, but rather the man who, you know, threw away some cigarette or whatever it was that sparked the fire.
Yes.
And now we are to establish whether or not there was some ill intent.
I would suggest that since the report, unless it's a classified report, and I would be surprised if it is, if it's not, they should make it public from today so that we can all peruse it and understand the subject when we are discussing. The AMA boss says that 40% of some of the things that had to be done have been done. In the absence of any evidence to the contrary, I will proceed along with him. But issue is this, we haven't had the kind of rainfall that we had that resulted. Of course, I agree the fire was part of the problem.
Right.
If it was just the rain, maybe we would not have had the tragic levels we had. But the point really is that we haven't had that level of rainfall, so I am not too sure whether indeed, assuming there was that, we've enhanced our capacity to deal with the same situation. That challenge is yet to come. Let's hope so. As a nation, we all wish for the best in these circumstances. Now come to the compensation package. Again, I don't know what the recommendations were, but did we identify all the victims? Those who died, they have bereaved families, and then those who didn't die survived the tragedy and whatever state in which they are. And some went to the hospitals, so
yes,
I think there are records,
yeah.
You know.
Some say they still have to visit the hospital.
The hospitals.
And they just can't afford it.
I find that very difficult to accept. They were identified, they were listed. It's different if you were not identified, you were not listed, you are not captured in any documentation, on any record.
No follow-up.
Yes, but if they were, and they go to the hospitals and the hospitals are charging them so they can't pay, I thought they would be given free of charge, okay? Because they are in a special category, no? So I don't know, we need to check some of these things. A fund was set up, was it? Where we told how much was raised or voted for? We don't know which committee is now handling the funds. I remember the stadium thing, they had a certain committee. We need to clear some of these things, and I'm sorry that I'm asking questions rather than making serious submissions.
Right, but I mean,
they are pertinent questions.
They are genuine. There's one who says that I have gone to the AMA offices countless times, but I haven't received anything. All the time, they would tell me they are still working on the documentation process. I have now realized they are lying to me and have decided not to follow up again. Another says, my brother, okay, he goes on, this Nana Osafo, and I'm looking at his pictures, his face is completely destroyed. And he says, while on the hospital bed, several promises were made to us by the people who visited us till date. None of those promises have been fulfilled. Although I do not have scars on my body, the infections from swallowing dirty oil water for over 2 hours has affected me. The trauma I went through alone is enough to kill anyone. So it would be very unfair to judge the depth of damage based on what you see on the outside, he stated.
Do I get an impression that the AMA is the pinpoint zone for the payment? I'm surprised. They could have been part of the listing of identifying and listing. But we need to have a certain, focal point.
Right.
Who must be in charge of this thing? I don't know. I'm not an expert.
I think the questions that you're asking, Kweku,
yeah,
demonstrates the lack of activity, the lack of anything. Because what everybody expects is that such a disaster happens, somebody takes control, everybody's aware of who's dealing with it, and a year down the line, when the mayor speaks, he speaks with authority about not just dredging the Odo River or whatever. He tells us systematically what has been done. These are the number of victims we've helped. This is and that and that. Nobody should be asking these questions. We should know. It should be a matter of course. In a civilized, modern, matured country, this is a matter of course. You go out there and everybody is fed this information. A year down the line, you call a press conference and you give the information.
Spoke to a number of them. One of them says that at the moment, I'm being asked to buy, he says, added to his woes is that the accident has affected his eyes and he has to go to the 37 military hospital every week for review. And he's quoted as saying, at the moment, I'm being asked to buy some medicine for the eye. But unfortunately, times are hard. And for me, and I'm unable to buy them. So they are paying for them.
I'm really finding things difficult. But you see, if you have this kind of thing, you give a focal point. An authority be in charge of this thing, because it's quite a long-term thing. Some of them going to take some time, even the trauma and everything, so really I'm really challenged. I can't understand even the fund setup. Sometimes you can reinvest, you make the fund investable, so that it can generate more things. Because
if I recall correctly, I think initially LEAP also went to their rescue.
So something must be wrong. Like maybe we don't have the sufficient information. I have to be honest. I don't have.
A total lack of.
Let's hear from you.
There's a certain deficiency in the information that we are gathering, because we are receiving information from those who are affected.
Yes.
Or not getting information from those who are supposed to act.
Yeah.
There's mention of AMA.
Those going to
social welfare. I've just chipped in the Ministry of Agriculture, maybe NADMO.
Is there coordination?
Maybe these agencies, they should have been quoted at this sitting.
I hear you.
NADMO says they've done so and so.
It's fair.
AMA says so. Government says so, etc.
The NADMO officials, they complain that sometimes they can't even afford fuel. They have to use their own vehicles and buy their own fuel.
You are saying so on their behalf.
Challenges.
You are saying so on their behalf.
They have said
but
so.
You are not. No, you are saying so on their behalf. But you haven't said that with respect to June 3rd disaster. This is what NADMO say they went up to, or this is what AMA says they went up to, or this is what social welfare say they have went up to. I've just spoken about Ministry of Agriculture. Perhaps you didn't know this until I mentioned it. The project is in Wager.
Wager, that's the place you are doing.
Yes, that's where it is being done. And it's clearing of the drains, as I was saying, and also providing some inputs for the farmers to regain their...
Also, you are giving them inputs?
Yes. Also,
okay.
In addition to that. So that's the issue.
Okay. Who commissioned the committee? Who set up the
Maybe
committee?
with the media too are part of the problem, because perhaps we should have been doing better probing of the issue to be able to get some results.
And like you said, maybe they should make the recommendations, the report public, so that all of us can share in it.